Hi everyone, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Exade Replay, coming to you with episode 18 of the series. Let's get right into it. So here we are, week 4 of no opening for the series. Today, the episode had the opening at the end. Daichi Miura's Excite was played at the end of the episode, not the beginning. So pretty much, yeah, this is what it is now. We can go ahead and look forward to never hearing it at the beginning again for quite some time, if ever again. Which is kind of weird when you consider the theme is doing very well on the Japanese pop charts over there, so you would figure you'd want to hear it at the front of the show, that way people were more aware of it, but, you know, whatever, that's their decision. So the big thing this week, the giant thing that they've been alluding to, at least for the past couple of weeks, is this reveal of what is going to happen when Emu finds out that he's got Bugster virus, and the build-up here is kind of worth the payoff, or at least where we're going with it. We've been building it up for a couple of weeks because Hiiro has had this agreement with Taiga. We're not going to tell him what's going on because we think the stress will cause him to go ahead and manifest the Bugster virus. But here, it's kind of funny how they're choosing to go about that specifically on Hiiro's end. Now we'll go ahead and focus on that later on in this episode, but right now I actually want to focus on a very important part that some people might miss on this episode, which is the patient, which is last week's patient, Kobushi Tsukudu. Now, as we've seen from last week, Mr. Tsukudu is an employee there at the Genmu Corporation who tells us this week that they've gotten a new president there at the Genmu Corporation. We don't see who they are yet, they're shrouded in light, but they've been tasked with creating more games because, you know, they're still a company, they still gotta run it. So they've made an agreement amongst all the employees there at the Genmu Corporation that they'll have a contest to see who can create the best game, which seems to be fun, you know, nice camaraderie around people building games, but that seems to be the crux of where his stress is going to come from this episode. Because here we see that, just like the jerk that he's been this whole time, even more so this episode, Kuroto-dan has come in and decided to reinfect Tsukudu because he's essentially jealous of him when you break that down. He tells him, one, you shouldn't be making any games. He roundaboutly admits this. I'm jealous that you or Emu were able to make any sort of gas shot. I am the only person that should be making gas shots. This is my thing. I'm the game master. I'm practically God. So screw you. Now part of this I think is building up now because clearly Kuroto-dan has somewhat of an ego, and that's kind of putting it lightly, but it's also that he's threatened by the fact that there are other Gashot possibilities out there beside himself. He thinks that he's the best, he thinks that he's the one on top of the world of gaming because he's been the person creating these game ideas, moving them forward, thinking he's the one in control of all these pieces. But when there's a portion of the game that he's not in control of, i.e. these new Gashots like Mighty Brothers XX and then Juju Burger last week, that throws him off. It throws off his plans. Now I think an important reason to watch out for Tsukudu, especially in this episode, is at the beginning of this episode, we see his name written out on screen, just like at the beginning of the series when we saw several characters' names introduced like that. So what I'm thinking is, and again, this is just theory at this point, Tsukudu will be very important later on, because if Genmu's the only one making Gashots right now, we can't keep having him do the same thing over and over again where he makes a Gashot and then suddenly it goes into the hands of the wrong person. No. What's a possibility now, since we see somebody who can officially make them, that Tsukudu might be responsible for helping Emu achieve his final form later on in the series. Now again, we'll see if that's true a couple of episodes, 15 episodes down the line, but that's just my theory and I'm stating that now. So we already talked about Hiiro and Taiga's plan this episode to not tell Emu, which eventually doesn't work, but we'll go ahead and focus on Taiga for a second. Now Taiga does try to fight Genmu, but eventually, inevitably has all of his Gashots taken away, and the thing about it is, I brought this up earlier in previous episodes, I think it's very unbalanced the way that Genmu, Kuroto-dan, shows this favor of wanting to kill Kiria several episodes back, and of course we miss him, but he's not trying to kill anybody else. He's not trying to kill Hiiro, he's not trying to kill Emu, he threatens Emu, but he doesn't try to kill Taiga either. I'm wondering why that is. Story-wise, that does seem unbalanced. And somewhat like I predicted, Saiba Nico brings nothing to this episode. She's just there in the background, yelling, cheering, jumping around. That's it. We've seen her character plateau, I think, already, and that, as I said, was very sad. Hopefully we'll get something more from her later, and there are possibilities, but for right now, I think this is all we're gonna get. So the thing that I think is interesting as far as Motos is concerned, and really all of the other Bugsters, is Motos says that there's a possibility of him obtaining a true form. Now this makes me think that the Bugsters are aware of their own possible evolution. Earlier on in the series, we saw that they had this giant form, and then they would go into the more regular, person in a suit form. but now if we're saying that there's a possibility of a third form, a true form, then that's something that we should be on the lookout for the other Bugsters. They could all evolve further, and that's something that the CR will want to be aware of. That's something that Genmu is probably aware of, but he's probably already factored that into his plans, especially as they relate to Kamen Rider Chronicle, and we should actually bring that up right now. So as far as Kuroto-dan is concerned, he's given us more details now about what he intends to do with this new game he's been creating, Kamen Rider Chronicle. He describes it as a game where civilians become riders and have to fight for their survival. Again, this is another throwback to Ryuki, I think, because when you think about the plot of Ryuki, back in 2002, we had this plot of regular people who were given the power to become riders, and then they had to fight for their survival. The way that Kuroto-dan makes it sound like is they're going to be fighting against each other, not necessarily the Bugsters, because in this episode we see he doesn't really care much about the Bugsters. They're pawns to him. So if this is something that he wants to implement, this is a very sort of, Ryuki Sword Art Online kind of world that he's perpetrating here, and if that's what he's building towards, man, that's really good for him as far as the evil villain character. I love the way he's just there mugging at the camera, making these creepy faces at Saiba Nico, at the other writers. He's really proving to be a worthy villain for this series, and I'm very appreciative that the writing is building him as such. Now, as I've stated, this is how Kuroto-dan thinks of the Bugsters, but the Bugsters themselves might not have the same opinion, specifically Pollard. Now, Pollard here in this episode shows that he's beginning to grow this disdain for the way Kuroto-dan is treating the Bugsters, because admittedly, yes, he did defeat a Bugster himself an episode or two back, but here it's just the wanton way that Kuroto-dan just doesn't care about them, throws them away like they were nothing. That's really getting under Pollard's skin, if he even has skin. The curious thing to bring up here is that Pollard seems to describe this Bugster code of honor that they bring up, that they have a very set way of looking at things. We have a game, we decide the winner, and then we're cool with that. That's the way it works. We play the game. When I defeated that Bugster, I was playing the game. You're not playing the game. You're essentially cheating. And the thing about it is, Pollard had to have been accepting of this fact about Kuroto-dan for several weeks now, but now he's had enough. He can't take it anymore, which is why he decides to go ahead and throw himself into the ring against Genmu. And to date, he's the only one who's been able to actually defeat him, knock him out of his rider form, and not have to worry about him regenerating himself as he constantly does. But that having been said, he still shows an allegiance to him. He's still on his side, at least for the time being. We don't know if it's going to stay that way, but at least we know now Pollard has shown himself to be a threat as Kamen Rider Paradox to Genmu and his plans. But now that we've covered the villains for this episode, let's go ahead and get back to the heroes, specifically Hiiro and how he's relating to Emu. Now, as we see at the beginning of this episode, Emu is starting to catch on here. He knows somebody's not telling him something, and people have been treating him a little weird for the last couple of episodes, but here it's apparent you guys aren't telling me something, which is why the episode starts off with him talking to Poppy People Papo as her nurse form, and Hiiro on the roof saying, "You guys know something, what aren't you telling me?" Now, Asuna, Poppy People Papo, however you want to call her, Asuna decides to not tell him what's going on, but admittedly she doesn't know anything just yet. Hiiro is still trying to play coy with the information. Now, Asuna, Poppy People Papo, however you want to phrase it, does eventually figure out this information, but I think it's kind of funny the way she figures it out is that Hiiro and Taiga are just talking to each other in front of her there in the video conference like she's not even there, like she doesn't even matter, and then of course she puts two and two together because she's given all the pieces. So I think it's a little interesting to see how they're treating her, probably because they don't care about her, probably because they know she's a Bugster, but I think that's kind of rude to her, and I didn't think that was something I would care about, but I ended up caring about that, how they're treating Asuna in this episode. Good job. So Hiiro, right? Let's talk about Hiiro here. So we've talked about this in the press conference, we've seen it here in the last episode, even more so this week. Hiiro's character is a very tsundere character, which means he acts like he doesn't care, but he does care quite a bit. And we're seeing a lot of that in the way he's working with Emu to try and cure him of the Bugster virus. Now, he doesn't want to let on that he wants to do this, but the things he's saying are kind of dead giveaways, especially when he says, "I just want to save the patient right in front of me," and he's looking directly at Emu. And the entire episode, he's just telling him, "Give me your ga shot, give me your ga shot, I'm gonna do this operation." And it would be hard-pressed for Emu to not figure it out. I mean, I get it. The story necessitates that he can't figure it out until the very end, but I think I've seen something like this before. That day, Emu was amazed to discover that when he was saying, "Give me your ga shots," what he meant was, "I love you." Yeah, that sounds pretty familiar. So as much as we see that Hiiro does care about what happens to Emu, and as much as we see that Taiga wants to try and stop this thing from happening, they both end up failing spectacularly, because at the end of the episode, of course after Genmu gets his butt beat by Paradox, we see just how much of a sore loser Kuroto-dan is. As the opening thing finally decides to start playing, Genmu decides to go ahead and tell everybody everything. He's gonna just put it all out in the open there. Hey Emu, guess what? You've got Bugster virus! And of course everybody's there running to try and stop him, but nobody can, because this is what's gonna happen. It's happening now. And initially, Emu is in a state of shock. He doesn't want to believe it, but then when he starts thinking about it, all this episodes of headaches that he's been having for the last couple of days, there's no way he can hide from it, and he starts to react. And the thing about it is, he looks like he's in a lot of pain, but we don't know what's happening to him. We see this gold light, surrounding him, his eyes are turning red, he's screaming, but we don't know what's happening. He's not disappearing, we don't know if a Bugster's gonna manifest, we don't know what's going on, which leaves us in suspense for next week. Man, that's a good cliffhanger. But we're gonna have to see how that works out next episode when Emu is still there, but we don't see a new Bugster, so we're not sure how that's going to work yet. But we do also see that Hiro's going to get a new form with this Tattle Fantasy Bang Bang Simulation level 50 Gashot that we see that Kuroto-dan finished this episode. So that's where we are in this series. I never would have thought we're almost to the 2/5 mark, and I would have never thought that the series would have been this good. I thought it was going to be alright initially when we started watching, but I never thought it was going to be like this. I am very satisfied with what I'm watching. I have a reason to come back next week. I want to see what happens to these characters. I want to see how the upgrades are gained, because it's interesting how they're playing back and forth with, somebody getting a Gashot, being given a Gashot, or even creating a Gashot of their own. I love how this is very enthralling, and I think people, if you're not watching, if you've just been watching here through YouTube, give the series a shot. It's definitely worth your time. But you guys tell me what you thought of this episode in the comments below. What do you think of Hiro's attitude? Do you think he should be a little bit more forthcoming with his feelings, or stay tsundere as he's been this whole series? What do you think of Paradox? Do you think Paradox will eventually be a good writer, or remain a wild card? And what do you think about Tsukuru as a potential for creating a new Gashot that Emu might use? You tell me in the comments below. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode. During the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 18 of Exade Replay for episode 18 of the series, The Revealed Truth. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.